Okay, thank you all for this opportunity. I am so excited to be here with you and present. I recognize the emphasis on short talk, so I will try to sort of breeze through and give you a sense for what we have worked on in the Theobald Lab. This is an app that we have developed and to visualize inequities in STEM classroom contexts. And we all know this problem. This problem is that educational inequities are disproportionate, and inequities in outcomes persist. Educational inequities in STEM begin in K through 12 and persist through higher education. The literature consistently documents disparities in access, participation, outcomes across demographic factors including race and ethnicity, first-generation college status, socioeconomic background. And these inequities result in lower enrollment, reduced retention, unequal achievement. So it's really a terrible cyclical cycle. And addressing all of these gaps, of course, requires structural change at all educational levels. There is a growing body of beautiful work with recommendations for instructors to mitigate these inequities. But what felt like an important first step towards changing the landscape of inequities was identifying inequities in STEM classroom contexts. And so the question as an instructor really is, how can I do that? I want to know if this is happening in my class, so maybe I'm thinking about, are there inequities as I'm teaching? What am I propagating unintentionally? Do inequities persist over time? Among which classes are the greatest inequities? And so our team focused on addressing this very need. We identify as educators and students of biology and biology education, and the idea really was to create a tool to empower instructors to visualize inequities within their own class contexts, and that this is something that can be adapted by departments and furthermore by institutions. And we have used our lenses, of course, as learners and practitioners, but we've also relied on frameworks, theoretical frameworks, as we've developed this tool, one of which is opportunity hoarding. This really helped us understand the nuance of the land of inequities and really what causes an inequity to emerge. What are students experiencing on the ground? And opportunity hoarding in the context of education refers to how people already in positions of power or privilege or in an in-group maintain their advantage by controlling or reserving access to valuable but limited resources. So in the context of education, that's reserving spots to advanced courses, getting access to internship opportunities, or research experiences. In STEM classrooms, this can result in some students feeling like they need to prove that they belong or they see themselves as an out-group, while others feel like they fit in naturally or part of an in-group. And this dynamic is reinforced by existing stereotypes and expectations that already label some groups as more capable and deserving than others. And after this, we also leaned into the QuantCrit framework. So QuantCrit stands for Quantitative Critical Race Theory and was articulated by scholars including David Gilborn. And according to the theory, disparities reflect disparities reflect systems, not students. So when we see gaps in outcomes that vary, for instance, by first-generation status or race, the cause is never the students, but the policies, practices, and structures that privilege some and disadvantage others. And second, we approach this work understanding that racism is embedded in educational and political systems. So it's not incidental, it's systemic and ongoing. And lastly, and importantly, QuantCrit reminds us that numbers carry assumptions. So data reflect choices. We have made several choices when we decide how to measure, categorize, and interpret data. And our choices might often reinforce dominant perspectives. And so it reminded us to question how or why we are making certain decisions. And then lastly, we relied on the ethic of care that was first put forward by Nell Noddings. They describe an ethic of care as a motivational force, so really a commitment to success and well-being of another person. And in the context of teaching, this means making education so that it's student-centered and really focused on the growth of students. According to it, care isn't just a feeling, but is relational and requires action. It finds expression in structures. So this is how we design our courses, how we design the curriculum, and how we're thinking about how to provide support for our students. And the ethic of care doesn't mean lowering standards. It means holding students to high expectations, but giving them the means to meet those expectations. And so we've taken this perspective, but really we're encouraging instructors to tap into this perspective and think about it for themselves and think about it towards themselves as they engage with the app. So really encouraging instructors not to judge, but acknowledge the mountain of work that they're doing and acknowledge their intentions and efforts and really use the tool to help align their intentions with outcomes. So with all of that in mind, we have developed an R-Shiny-based application, and this work is already published. The code is freely available and modifiable, and I'll share that at the end. But here I'll be taking you through the website version of this app. This is an example that we've created with preloaded data for users to explore the app. And so first, when you open the app, it reminds you of the framing. This is hard work, and so we really want to have users think about it in the context of what they're already doing. So it reminds us of what the app is meant to do. It's meant to disaggregate student data by student identities. And the broader context of this is definitely that inequities exist, and instructors, though, have agency. So the classroom can be a powerful start. And the data presented here comes from anonymized institutional records, but they reflect real patterns in student performance. To help visualize these patterns, we use violin plots. These are more detailed than box plots. They not only show the median and quartile ranges, but also give you a sense for the distribution of the data. So that design really invites instructors to notice variation that might otherwise be hidden. And then what you would do is you would toggle to the data tab. So there's a background tab that lands you to the landing page, and then a data tab in which you can start exploring the data. So you might want to go in and select a year range or a year that you're interested in looking at data for, the course you're interested in looking at, quarter, and then which demographic group you'd like the data disaggregated by. After viewing the results, you're met with guided reflection questions and a small set of curated resources, all of which are essentially to serve as a starting point as instructors embark on their reflection journey. And just from a function of time, I'm going to skip over the part when I invite you to look at the app, but be rest assured, I'm going to share that right at the end. But the question really is, are there inequities in student grades? And how might an instructor think about what kind of comparisons are instructors or users thinking about when approaching that question? So imagine you're an instructor reviewing data from one of your recent courses, and you want to know, did all groups of students have similar experiences or outcomes? It might be helpful to explore trends by student groups. So here in this preloaded version of the app, we have 3 demographic factors. You could disaggregate by race or ethnicity, race, and then first generation status, and then gender. And you could essentially compare all those views. And looking at the medians right here, we see that racially minoritized and first generation students show a larger performance gap in comparison to their peers. This is in line with previous literature also, but the violin plots help us go further for our own class context. So the top end of the distribution is much narrower for racially minoritized students, suggesting that they're underrepresented among the highest performers. So this view helps instructors therefore identify which disparities are most pronounced in their own classroom so that they can begin thinking about targeted support. Now, imagine you're an instructor who teaches multiple courses. So maybe a lower division course, an upper division course, and a seminar class. Yes, you have a full load. And the question is, are equity patterns consistent across my classes? And here, might be really helpful is looking at all the 3 courses. So course 1 is your lower division class, course 2, the upper division class, and you have your summer course, which is course 3. And just by looking at these, we find that course 2 is actually where the disparities are most pronounced for racially minoritized students. And I'm saying this in part because of where the median is at, but also the shape of the curve. Which differs sharply. So majoritized students here are tightly clustered at higher GPAs, whereas minoritized students have a broader, lower distribution. And so this indicates that more students in minoritized groups are scoring well beyond the median. So this might be a good place to start prioritization. I think we thought a lot about prioritization, just also recognizing that instructors have so much to do, and all of this can be very overwhelming. And so how can we make it so that you have a prioritized list of, okay, maybe if I want to start something, here's where I could start. And then also, course 3, as you can see, does not have a racially minoritized group that has come up. And this isn't a glitch. It's because we've set the minimum cell size of 10 to protect student anonymity. So when data for a group doesn't appear, it often means that very few students from that group are enrolled. And so that makes this absence also meaningful. It might be worth considering if there are structural barriers limiting access or participation, depending on your educational context. But yeah, then moving on, let's say you have been teaching the same course for a while, but you're wondering if there is an inequity, a gap that has existed, is it improving? Might be worthwhile looking at how the gap has been over time. And in this example, we're looking at 4 years of teaching. We're focusing on racially minoritized and majoritized students and the differences between them. And what's useful here is that what we find is that the median and the shape of the curve for racially minoritized students is both lower and different respectively. And so this trend helps one start to understand what disparities have persisted over time. Again, points to something that's maybe more systemic in the context of the class and a potential for structural changes. Okay, so the next question really is, what contributes to the inequities? As instructors, we're always pairing data with what do I do next? And you're probably already thinking about course features and interventions that you might want to try in your classes, right? So course features being, okay, maybe I should think about the attendance policies or the grading patterns or interventions that you're thinking about. To support this kind of reflection, the app links to a small curated set of resources. Some are literature-based recommendations, so the ones you see here are talking about how to do a high structure class, which we know has had disproportionate benefits for racially minoritized and first-generation students. And we've also included links that are internal to our own institution, so we're the Teaching and Learning Center at UW Seattle. And just like the entire app, the curated resources are also modifiable to incorporate other institution-specific resources or additional educational research findings. And I want to emphasize that the goal here is not to suggest a single comprehensive fix. It's to empower instructors to reflect, try things out for themselves, but really also serve as a conversation starter for instructors as they dabble through and think through this. So that brings me to what I think is the most important part of this work, which is that thinking about inequities and figuring out how to mitigate them is really hard. And we think it's crucial to have a system or an ecosystem of support to do this kind of work. And this app I've already talked quite a bit about what individual instructors could do, but this app is really designed to support multiple levels of reflection. So individual instructors are already thinking about the kind of inequities they're seeing, what they can do to mitigate these inequities. But what would be powerful would be to take the guiding questions, take the conversations or thoughts that have come out of the interventions that instructors are individually thinking about, and talk about them in groups. Talk about them as in departments, teaching teams, professional learning communities. And these group spaces can really support some really great sense making. So identifying patterns, aligning across course sections, offering peer support, mentorship. And then a final hope for this data is that there is a way for institutions to use it thoughtfully. And one way is that faculty often lack easy access to clear disaggregated data for self-evaluation and promotions, and institutions can provide this as a standard service to reduce the burden and variability in data use, to reduce the burden on instructors primarily. But we recognize that overall the shift towards equitable teaching could be best supported if institutions are able to garner trust from their faculty, and really it demonstrates a commitment to improvement, not surveillance on their part as well. Also why supportive cultures and a commitment to faculty development are just so key in creating a conducive environment for this work. Okay. So with that, I will keep you no longer from accessing and exploring the app that we've generated. I really want to do a huge shout out to the incredible team in the Theobald Lab. This was a hugely collaborative project and could not have been possible without all of them. And here's our paper. Everything is freely available.
We do indeed have time for a couple of questions. Yes.
Yeah.
I see all the way in the back. The mic's coming.
Oren.
Thanks for the talk. It was really cool. What made you want to try violin plots? Did you try other forms of plots? Did you do any testing on what people are most receptive to? Personally, I'm a histogram lover, so I would love to see it as a histogram too. Wonder if you experimented with other things.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of conversations about this, and we really wanted to give instructors access to the most amount of information. Also recognizing that people come from different fields and different trainings. So we thought that violin plots basically gave instructors all the information to make sense of the data, and then depending on their training, their inclination, and stuff like that, they would have all of it, basically, to pick and choose what they want to. We also, though, as a lab, I would say, really appreciate violin plots because there's so much that you can learn from the distribution and the pattern of a distribution, much of which I also talked about a little bit, that you miss when you're looking at medians or only quartile ranges.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
That was a very good presentation. It's very inspiring. I really like the very last part where you talk about how different hierarchies of parties are responsible in this entire process. I'm curious about on the instructor level, after they've identified the disparities in the data and reflected from it, are there any resources or guidelines they would follow to mitigate those problems, and how would they track future groups of student performances across longitudinally in the future years?
I love that question. Yes, there is a wealth of knowledge in the biology education research field that a lot of researchers are spending a lot of time thinking deeply about how to mitigate inequities within classroom context, right? And so there's definitely a lot of recommendations for instructors to try out new things in terms of, and I think all of this comes down to sort of trial and error. So I think the example I gave here was a high structure course and suggesting that if I see differences between minoritized and majoritized students, and as an instructor, maybe I'm not doing as much high structure learning, but once I have the opportunity to learn more about it, I have more ideas. So I try to incorporate some more of that into my class. And then I think your second question about, okay, how do you assess change, right? I think Yes, there are a ton of recommendations on how to do that well. Also, I think with regards to this app, we've really hoped for it to be an easy access, but a starting point for instructors to embark on their journey for assessment. So we have tried to steer away from this sort of being the be all and end all indicator of what improvement looks like, but really a very helpful sort of starting point for instructors to more accurately plan out what their assessment plan would look like.